Thanks so much. I love this mic, and thank you for taking your Saturday morning with me. I have really 3 things, and I have so many slides that you please let me know when I should stop talking and you want to ask questions, right? This is what I want to do today. And I hope that there's something for everyone in the room, because these are interlocking parts. They're all problems we need to solve, and we need to do them simultaneously, right? So I've been a journalist for more than 30 some odd years. I'm much older than I look, or maybe I look as old as I am. So, you know, I'll give you lessons learned. I only have 5. I've compressed all of that. And then the second, technology. I know that you have coding lessons here, so that's really great, but I'll show you our experience about it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then the third part is I will show you our financial performance, because if you have no sustainable business model, which is where news groups are today, advertising has shifted. It has gone to the very same social media, the technology platforms that's being used to also attack us, right? So without a sustainable business model, we can't be independent. And that's what I'll end with. So I'm gonna go fast. Stop me, and then we'll keep going. And I hope that you can see some of it. Yes, I'm sorry to bombard you with pictures of me, but all the way up here, you can just see how much things have changed. 1980s. Was anyone here a journalist in the 1980s? I know you are, like me. No, but in the 1980s, we could take 2 weeks and go off and actually spend a lot of time with people and think and talk, and you don't have to file a story every hour, right? But then the 1990s, which would be where here, there's a live shot, and then I moved to open the Jakarta Bureau in 1995, and then it's really per hour, and I spent most of my time standing in front of a live shot while my producer would go out and look for new things that I can say, right? You get tired of yourself the way I'm tired of myself now all the time. Anyway, so 1990s, in 2000, this is 2000, we're standing on top of a cargo container in East Timor, Asia's newest country at that point, but 95% of the infrastructure had just been destroyed in a scorched earth policy by the Indonesian military, to the point that even the pipes, they punched holes in the pipes, so there was nothing there. And here comes CNN, and we bring a cargo container, and we are live from there, right? So from 2000s, and then I decided when I turned 40, I was gonna choose home. And I chose the Philippines, for better or for worse. I chose the Philippines, and I headed the largest news group in the Philippines, ABS-CBN. This was our 2010 elections, and I ran a news group of about 1,000 people. And then when did we start Rappler? In 2012. This is there now. I left CNN. Doing that was one of the hardest things, because so much of the way I grew up, my identity was tied up with that. But, you know, it was so interesting to then go to ABS and then leave that and start with nothing, with 0 and 12 people, from managing 1,000 people to 12 people, and then growing something from nothing. It was truly humbling, extremely exciting, and I'll take you through that journey. We've gotten far more attention now after we came under attack, but I'll show you some of the things that I think are lessons learned. So here are my 5 lessons. I covered every single conflict area and war zone in Southeast Asia and some in South Asia, and I boiled it down to just 5 lessons. Whatever the choice is, make the choice to learn. Whatever new thing, whether you have to turn right or turn left, which is the path that will take you to some place where you can learn something. That's really helped me. And that's also helped at a time when we have to be agile and you have to keep learning. And frankly, the business model I'll show you at the end of this will shift. And I think the shifts, like the technology, shifts every 3 months, minimum, right? The second, and I'm a little bit Buddhist in this, you know the 4 laws, the very first law of Buddhism. When I was a freshman in college, I went and studied the major world religions, and I liked Buddhism because the first noble truth is all life is suffering. If you latch onto that, then everything is really good, right? Think about it, right? So embrace your fear. Whatever that thing is you are most afraid of, touch it, hold it, own it, imagine the world with that, and then everything else that comes your way just becomes so easy because you're already prepared for the worst thing you are afraid of. Embrace your fear. Third, beware of the pack. And we know, I wrote this way before social media came in, and you can have mobs online doing this, but even in covering conflict zones, if you're with a large group of journalists, the minute fear comes in, whether this is in Indonesia, in Jakarta, in East Timor, all the journalists, the foreign journalists tended to stick together in a hotel called the Turismo. And when the attacks began, and someone is afraid, it spreads like wildfire. What we did there is we went and found a home, a government home, hired the house, outfitted it for the year, and we were the last group to come out of East Timor. And you're talking about, very small compared to what we're dealing with in the Philippines, 1,400 people killed during that time in 1999. But it allows you to control, because the hardest part is that thing in your gut, right? You have to fight the fear at the same time. If you're around people who will ignite your fear, then you will work, you will do the thing that adrenaline pushes you to do. So beware the pack. 3. 4, on taking risks. If you guys have done hostile environment training, and CNN put us through this in, my gosh, it would have been 94, 95. And the idea there is that if you're in a conflict area, let's just say, a person has been shot in front of you, and there's still gunfire from one side, and you want to help that person, they always said you have to think about this one phrase: danger to me, danger to you. Assess danger to you, and then assess the danger to yourself. Will you add yourself? If the gunfire has stopped, then you can go and help. But if the gunfire is still ongoing, then you cannot help because you wind up being another burden if you get shot, right? If you're in a conflict area, that always winds up happening. You have to prepare for the worst case scenarios. If you're hurt, what do? Everyone on your team needs first aid. If you want to help somebody, how do you help yourself if you are also putting yourself in danger? So on taking risks, what are the risks? Danger to me, danger to you. I prefer the risk being to me versus to someone else on my team, and I'll show you that example later. And then finally, the last one is, the 5th lesson I've learned is from a movie called Somewhere in Time. You guys know this movie? Yes, it's an old movie. Jane Seymour, it was like Clark Kent, the Christopher Reeves at that time. They were talking to an actress, and they said, the greatest performance that you can ever have, and I think this is true in journalism, this is true in every discipline, is excess within control, right? If you're a concert pianist, before you can actually create, you have to do these very technical exercises. You have to prepare yourself. It's like going to the gym. Excess within control, to me, is like Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock put together. Anybody remember Star Trek? I'm dating myself, right? Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock. Mr. Spock will always provide the logic, but Captain Kirk will provide the emotion. Excess within control. I always think, let me transpose that to today's technology. Man and machine, excess within control. The best decisions I've made have been a combination of logic and emotion. Do not push out the emotion. The best stories you do is when you're emotionally involved in it, right? But at the same time, if you're too emotional, then it's maudlin and sentimental. You have to find the right note of excess within control. Those are my lessons when you're making decisions of trying to decide. So many lessons. What choice do you make? A man who wants to ride with you, but when you put him in your car, it puts your whole team in danger. which mission. You will always have these difficult choices to make, and somehow these 5 lessons have helped me through the years. I'm going to go into one example that shows you, that leads you directly to why we set up Rappler, to the ideas behind Rappler. And it's this. In June of 2008, I was managing ABS-CBN at that point. She's one of our, Ces Drilon was one of our reporter anchors. She had 2 cameramen with her, Jimmy Encarnacion and Angelo Valderrama. They were kidnapped by the Abu Sayyaf. She woke me up at 7:30 in the morning and said, you know, we've been kidnapped. And again, if you're the manager, your stomach sinks. And what I'll show you, again, is, I hope you see it in the context of where we are today. We did something very different, something Western nations told us we shouldn't have done, but I thought it was the right thing to do. We took the families of the 3 of them. I cordoned off 2 floors in a hotel outside Manila. I took the crisis management team and included the families in it. We sealed it off security-wise because I felt that I wanted them to see that we were doing everything we could to get our people out. Sometimes when crisis happens, people turn on each other. So one of the key things is to hold everyone together. We got them out in 10 days. 10 days of hell. That was worse than what I'm going through now. This is the worst thing I've ever lived through, because you know that I knew that whatever actions we took, it would have an impact on their lives. The 10 people who had been kidnapped before my team, their organization, which was they were building roads, decided not to negotiate, and all 10 of them were beheaded. So it was truly life and death, and I was so thrilled. I was hiding behind Angel inside the plane that got them out. So what did I do with that? I wrote a book. But I also understood exactly how social networks work, because the guy who kidnapped them, the 18-year-old guy who lured them into the jungle, was 3 degrees of separation away from Osama bin Laden, if you do the network analysis, right? So I was a big fan of network analysis. And the whole thing behind the book was about charting social networks, harnessing the power of social networks. How did we get to these guys? Because we knew a former member of the Abu Sayyaf who helped us get through. We knew members of intelligence who allowed us to bypass the traditional bureaucracy instead of going top down, which, by the way, the Red Cross, ICRC, had 3 people kidnapped a month after they were released, and they were in the jungles for almost a year, right? So I did not want that. Harness the power of social networks. And then finally, the third one, which led directly to Rappler, is mapping the spread of emotions and behavior. How does this come together? So this is how it started me thinking about information cascades. For television, we would call it broadcast, right? But for an information cascade among networks, if you look at all these numbers, I would think I would give the information, if I wanted to spread through here, to number 10. Would I give it to anyone else? Because of the way social cascades happen, I would give it to 2 more. But if you only give it to number 10, all of a sudden you'll see that it would stop spreading because it hits the edges. Then you need something called a boundary spanner. You guys familiar with the boundary spanner? So a boundary spanner, Tom is now a boundary spanner between me and the networks here in the school. We're boundary spanners to each other. When we meet each other, I can bring your message to my networks in the Philippines, and you can bring my message to your networks here. The boundary spanner spans between 2 networks, which would be 11, 12, 18, 14, or 3. So if I were to cascade something, I would give it to 10, and maybe 12, and maybe 3, right? And then it would cascade to the next network. This is the way I used to talk about social media in 2012, right? So you can see the good of it. We're moving towards the good. This is what you see in the tweet is really only the tip of the iceberg. And that tweet or post carries an emotion. That emotion travels on social networks. And what are social networks? Social networks are your family and friends in the physical world. What's social media? Social media are your family and friends without boundaries of time and space. This is when I was very, very optimistic about the impact of technology. And it's worth going back to this, because then I'll show you how it was turned against us. But here's the last part. Buried underneath the ice, this glacier, is the change in behavior. I figured if terrorists can spread this radical ideology through social networks, both in the real world and in the virtual world. I published that book, by the way, like a year before ISIS really started taking off, because we started seeing the movement to social media. If we can do that, why not go bottom up and actually create institutions bottom up? That was the idea. Can we change behavior? Can we harness behavior for civic engagement? Here's the good. This is Rappler, right? So in 2012, we formed a group called Rappler. I started with 12 people. It grew to 75 in a year and a half, and we became the third top online news site in the Philippines, the top in terms of online only. And why? This is the way we talk about ourselves. We build communities of action, right? How? Professional journalism, investigative journalism there. The second Venn diagram would be embracing the technology. And the third is embracing your community. And I put Rappler smack in the middle. We build communities of action. And if you think about this part as content creation, distribution then comes here. Social media. Social media brings engagement, which can give you crowdsourcing. I'll show you a potent example of impact in the real world. And then the last part is that all brings data. And what is that big data? Social media is unstructured big data. If you can actually, you can analyze it, and I'll show you some of the things that we've done. This is how we started, nothing. Then we had one room. Again, that 12 people, we set up a studio. I do television. So we started it really like, I took the phone and said, we want to put, before anyone actually was doing this, this was in the end of 2011, the beginning of 2012, I want Rappler here. I want it in your pocket, in your phone. But now it's normal. In 2011, 2012, it wasn't. It was so abnormal that look at the case around the phone. We actually had to get a metallurgist, a metal factory to help create this case for the phone, so that we cobbled together a very kind of unsophisticated, very heavy thing for our reporters. And the funny thing is, at the beginning, they used our ABS-CBN, the old network I managed, would laugh at our reporter because they'd be talking to their cell phone. Now it's normal, right? Because once you do that, you can upload it immediately, and the television crew has to go back, process their video before they can even push it up. So this was in 2012. And that was part of the reason we grew 100 to 300% year on year, both in reach and revenue at the beginning. You have to be at the beginning. Because I was a traditional broadcaster, we even built an OB van. It was 2012. What can I tell you? IP satellite OB van. And again, because a traditional broadcast van would be like $1 million. This one we built for $100,000. And by doing this, we were able to bring it to places like this. This was behind the city hall in Tacloban when Super Typhoon Haiyan hit. Our IP satellite was the only one that was able to bring information to the rest of the world, right? It's still there, but it's now outdated. That was only 2013, right? So this is the ecosystem we created with Rappler. That part that I showed you, events, because nothing in the virtual world is real until you anchor it in the real world. We did a blogging platform on top of Rappler because I wanted to follow the tech companies. Gosh, if they get away with this, why not us, right? Anyway, we diffused that after we came under attack. But X was a blogging platform. And then we created tools that could map our communities. That was a community around a story that was done in Jakarta that we had done, right? So that was our ecosystem. Why the Philippines? Because for more than 3 years now, the Philippines spends the most time on the internet, no matter how slow our speed is. This is Hootsuite. You can see this. Look at January 2018, we're #1 in terms of time spent on social media, the 3rd year we were. And then look at the 2019. This was January 2019, 10 hours on the internet, right? And then look at the time spent, we were #1 again on time spent on social media. I show you this, 4 hours. When we say social media in the Philippines, 97% of Filipinos on the internet are on Facebook. Facebook is our internet, right? 4 hours, 100 million people. And what winds up happening is the Philippines becomes this petri dish for social media, for experiments. And I don't think it is any coincidence that the Philippines, the election of Duterte was May 2016. A month later was Brexit. Then you had Trump. Then you had Catalonia, all the way through, right? 2016 was a bad year. So this is the Philippines as your petri dish, as your cautionary tale. You here know better than I do what's happened with Brexit and the disinformation networks. Now, let me bring you to 2019. And we began 2019, that's really the way it began. We dropped the ball. So one of the things that happened is news groups around the world decided that we needed to come together and collaborate. That this, what is local, is actually a global problem, because that was when we were seeing cheap armies on social media rolling back democracy. The first reports were out in 2017. 28 nations in 2018. It went up to 48 nations. I hate to see what the number will be like in 2019. This is our battle today. What are we fighting in the Philippines? Impunity on 2 fronts. This is the brutal drug war. That's the impunity of government. As of December 27, 2017, because the government was slightly schizophrenic, the police needed to not just come out with a number for how many they've killed, but it also needs to include the larger number, because otherwise they won't get paid. This is only among us, the last part about paid, right? Well, no, we just did a 7-part series on the vigilantes that the police gave lists to and then paid them for the killings. As of December 27, 2017, this is the government's own numbers. They put 2 numbers together that they always separate. 3,967 killed in the drug war with the 16,355 homicide cases under investigation. They put them together. That number, as of now, is more than 5,000 people killed, nearly 6,000. That's what the police admit to. And then the homicide cases under investigation are more than 30,000. The UN says that as of July 2016, there are more than 27,000 people killed in the drug war. This is without benefit of due process, right? 27,000. So we're doing impunity series on this, and we continue to do it. We continue to hold the government accountable. The second is, we call it the propaganda war, but I'll show you why it's also impactful to you. We came out with this series in 2016. In August of 2016, I went to Facebook and I said, look, our data is scaring me. You really have to do something about this. This is pivoting on us, you know? And at that point, I wasn't really getting attacked yet. But when I started putting the data together, I said, you know, if you don't do something, Trump could win. This is August of 2016, and we all laughed, because no one thought Trump could win at that point. August of 2016. When he won in November, Facebook came back and asked me for the data again, right? Let me show you. So I didn't really get much of a response from them, even though we're alpha partners. So we went ahead and did this series. This 3-part series was published the end of September, the beginning of October. And I'll show you how it began. 26 accounts. This is the Excel sheet, because I'm a journalist, not a data person technically, right? Not a tech person. I wanted an Excel sheet. And we went through all 26 accounts. And we went through everything they said they were, who they were connected to. And we showed that the 26 fake accounts could actually reach up to 3 million other accounts. 26 fake accounts can reach up to 3 million. Think about that, because in the French elections, Facebook took down 30,000 fake accounts. Right? If they had taken down fake accounts in the Philippines, would our democracy be better? So we came out with this story, Fake Accounts, Manufactured Reality on Social Media. That's the third part of the series. The first part was this, something we discovered because they were playing with Rappler. In September of 2016, there was a bombing in Davao City. So after that, we realized that there was a March article that had gone viral, and we couldn't figure out why. It was #1 on our site in September. March, September, right? So then we dug deeper and found that there were websites that had taken our old March story, and those websites were being spread on the campaign accounts of Duterte and Marcos. That's why it was #1 on our site. We have an average of 8 to 10 million uniques every month, so to be #1 on Rappler means there's a lot of people being reached, right? So we looked at this story. Look at that. They released this a few hours before they declared a state of lawlessness in Davao. It was spread on these Facebook pages that were used for the campaign. And then after that, so that was Friday night, on Saturday morning by 11 a.m., the government declared a state of lawlessness. But this, again, is kind of setting the ground to be able to show that they're already doing something, right? They made a mistake here because they included the link to us. Because what they've done is hire former journalists to actually do the sophisticated, this kind of propaganda. So what happened? We came out with the first part of the series, Propaganda War, Weaponizing the Internet. And you can see October 3rd was when we published this. Paid trolls, fallacious reasoning, leaps in logic, poisoning the well. These are only some of the propaganda techniques that have helped shift public opinion on key issues. This was insidious. It was manipulating the public sphere. So here's the global phenomenon. You should tell me when I should shut up, because I can fast forward through some of this, right? Patriotic trolling was something that we were working on with 12 other research groups around the world. Carly Neist is one of the ones. The phrase itself was coined by a French researcher working with Jigsaw. Her name is Camille Francois. Patriotic trolling, state-sponsored online hate and harassment campaigns to silence and intimidate. After we came out with the series, I got pummeled with an average of 90 hate messages per hour. 90. What do you do? At the beginning, I actually tried to respond and tried to argue and debate. Then you realize they don't want to do that. They just want to pound you to silence. And so I just started counting how many hate messages I got. I'll show you some of them. So the goal here is not to censor, it's to flood the market with false news, with disinformation. Women, in 2004, there was a study that was done by 2014. It was done by Demos that showed that women are targeted 3 times more than men. This was in the West. In the Philippines, our data shows us, and we're still finishing the study, but it's about 10 times more than men. Women are an easy target, and these are the 3 steps. I felt this. I used Senator Laila de Lima, who's been in prison for more than 2 years now, as an example. The same thing happened to her. First is attack the credibility, allege corruption, repeat it exponentially. A lie told 1,000,000 times is the truth. No one rebuts it, especially organizations, because we think this is asymmetrical warfare, guys, right? So we don't pay attention, but it erodes trust. The second, especially against women, use sexual violence, inflame the biases, fuel misogyny, degrade the target as a sexual object. And I saw this happening with Laila de Lima. You see this happening. Last year you had Rana Ayub here, right? She had a deep fake. It's really horrendous when you're the target. And then the third part, and this happened with Laila de Lima, a few weeks before she was arrested, they astroturfed, #arrest Laila de Lima. And in May of 2017, they tried to trend #arrest Maria Ressa. I think they did arrest me in 2019, but at that point, I think the reason they didn't arrest me was precisely because it didn't trend. It actually was only picked up by a few. So here it is. I'll show it to you, and I'll show you that ecosystem and how it works. #arrest Maria Ressa. This was a conversation between Trump and Duterte. We published this story along with the Washington Post and The Intercept. And you can see this is one of the content creators, also admitted he worked for the government. He said, very laughable statement here. Rappler just made the Philippines a legitimate target of North Korean nuclear missiles. Because we did the story, right? You laugh. I laughed also, and then I realized people were taking it seriously. Because from there, so he used hashtag Arrest Maria Ressa. Can I say May 2017? That's when he did this. And then it jumps to Twitter. Ipatawag na yan sa Senado. Call her to the Senate. Hashtag Arrest Maria Ressa. This is a campaign account also. The weaponization of the campaign accounts happened in July of 2016. Then after that, it jumps to an overseas Filipino worker, a Duterte supporter. May 2017, right? I was arrested in February 2019. I can smell an arrest and possible closure of Rappler.com. We haven't been closed yet. And hashtag Arrest Maria Ressa. Then we go to that second part of the sexual stuff. This was on Facebook, on the page of Rappler. Maybe Maria Ressa's dream is to become the ultimate porn star in a gangbang scene. It isn't, but you know, it's there. And then, here, me to the RP government, make sure Maria Ressa gets publicly raped to death when martial law expands to Luzon. It would bring joy in my heart. By the end of May, martial law was declared in Mindanao. It's been renewed 3 times now. It hasn't reached Manila. But after I posted this, because the only weapon a journalist has is to shine the light, right? After I posted this, these 2 guys, they were graduating seniors in college. And their schools contacted me and apologized and actually offered that I meet with Miguel Yabut. I didn't really have time to meet with him. But, you know, again, I worry about the change in our values. Because when you have a president who is sexist at best and misogynistic at worst, it has an impact, right? Here's the other part, historical revisionism. It's not just the post that's a problem, it's the comments. And we actually look at all of this, right? This is how you revise history. And if you look at our midterm elections just last May, Ferdinand Marcos's daughter is now a member of the Senate. The entire family, along with Imelda Marcos, who, by the way, has been convicted in 4 different courts in 4 different countries, and yet I've paid at least 5 times more in bail and bonds than Imelda Marcos. Go figure, right? Anyway, let's go back to here. Look at the subtlety of historical revisionism. The same comment, cut and paste. Martial law in the 70s. My parents even say you can watch TV and news and even roam around the streets. And here I had believed the dark narration and full twisting of this part of history during my elementary high school days. It wasn't all dark. Pala means, it wasn't all dark, I guess. The historians and maybe media made it all dark. It's our fault. It's not. So that's how you gradually revise history. And then after these types of attacks, then of course, I've been personally attacked now because since January 2018, we face, in 14 months, the government filed at least 11 cases and investigations. In 3 months, I've had to post bail 8 times. And in February, I was arrested. In a 5-week period, I was arrested twice and detained once. And all I do is be a journalist. Don't get scared, it's not that bad. So here's what they did. Then they just decided to lie about me, right? And they hired former journalists to do it. This is a guy who used to work for me in ABS-CBN. How can Ressa be a Filipino when both her parents were Indonesians? She uses a US passport and the American embassy prays that their citizen be given fair trial for her twin criminal cases. I responded to him because I know him, and I posted this on Twitter. While I lived in Jakarta for a decade, my parents are not Indonesians. I gotta laugh, that's what I do now. And because I laugh, you know, the spokesman in the palace actually said, you know, Maria Ressa, she's enjoying this. And she's weaponizing journalism against us. How do you respond to that? So I have dual citizenship, US and Philippines, tremendous resources being spent for online disinformation like the legal acrobatics. By this point, social media had been weaponized. I used the term astroturf. I know you guys know what that means. And then when the cases were filed, the law had been weaponized against us. The cases are so The cases range from securities fraud to tax evasion to cyber libel. The cyber libel case was filed, that's my first arrest. That was for a story we did 7 years ago that was published months before the law we supposedly violated had been enacted. Go figure, right? Anyway, I'm gonna end with this, where we began, and look at what we do. Our world today, right? This is the Philippines today. I think it's a lot of different countries combine online and offline violence to create a climate of fear. Anyone who questions the brutal drug war, supports those who fight for truth, attack them with the full force of the Philippine government, make them cautionary tales for anyone demanding the truth. People get pounded to silence. So what do? I sound very naive here, but I'm not. You start with your area of influence, right? It still goes to that. That's why we're democracies. You demand accountability, you stand up against bullies. Starts there. Report the lies, tell your family and friends. Courage spreads. We begin by taking care of what's in front of us. Don't be pounded to silence. It isn't Rappler, it isn't just the Philippines. You're walking into an industry where you're gonna have to stand up, you're gonna have to be creative, you're gonna have to be courageous.